if I'm going to be an outlier, the first thing is alignment. Alignment with what we'll call purpose. What lights you up? What do you get excited about? What do I want to build? What's going to be my life by design? Because so many people are not living their own lives. They're living somebody else's life or by somebody else's design or what other people need or what other people want. Instead of really going, well, what do I need? And then what kind of life do I want for me? Not for the expectations, not for society, not for what anybody else thinks you should be doing or thinking or living. None of that matters. At the end of the day, it's you and what matters with you on the inside. Because if that's not aligned, don't even bother. Because the other stuff won't matter if you don't have that down.
Welcome to the Gen X Shift podcast, a show for Gen Xers who are navigating some pretty tough transitions and aren't sure how to move forward. I'm your host, Michele Walter, proud Gen Xer, former lawyer turned entrepreneur, huge Jason Momoa fan, and margarita snob. And I've navigated a lot of transitions in my life, from losing my mom suddenly to a heart attack to starting my own business. But I often did it all on my own because I was too stubborn to ask for help. Now I'm on a mission to give actionable strategies to other Gen Xers so that they can find the confidence, courage, and clarity they need to make a shift. So let's rock and roll. Hey Gen Xers, welcome back to the podcast. I am so thrilled this week to bring you a very special conversation with a dear childhood friend of mine turned serial entrepreneur who's had amazing success, Rodman Schley. Rodman is a purpose-driven outlier in entrepreneurship, real estate, and media, and he has a litany of things that he has accomplished, and yet he's very tethered to reality. He's very grounded. He's just a good old Gen X Nebraska dude. Rodman is a serial entrepreneur who has launched over 25 businesses. He's a real estate expert, an acclaimed television producer and host, which we didn't even talk about during our conversation, but I'll make sure and link that in the show notes. He's a published author, an executive consultant, an entrepreneur coach, and a keynote speaker. He's published 3 books, and they're all going to be included in the show notes, but the one that we really focus on is the one called The Outlier Mindset, a guide to living with purpose and evolving exponentially. Go get this book. It's super short. It might take you 2 hours to read it. I don't care where you are in life, what you have going on in your life. This book will help you lean into a new perspective of how you can start to be what Rodman calls an outlier. Somebody who thinks outside of that bell curve. And it doesn't matter if you want to start your own business or if you just want to find more purpose and joy in your life. This is the book that's going to teach you how to do that. Rodman's book, The Outlier Mindset, stems from his personal journey of living through, growing through adversity in his life, and to realizing that he may not be able to control what happens to him, and he can certainly control and have more autonomy and responsibility over his reaction to what happens to him. Rodman is a lifelong friend who has overcome a lot of challenges and adversities and not lived in a victim mindset. I've known him since we were both young kids growing up in Lexington, Nebraska. We reconnected a little over 10 years ago, probably through Facebook. And it's been so wonderful to spend more time with him now in Colorado and his wife, Gina, who's an amazing entrepreneur that I also want to have on the show, and their 2 beautiful daughters. It makes me so happy to see Rodman overcome so many challenges growing up and get to where he is now. From being one of the lower class kids in our town, to his parents divorcing, to surviving sexual assault at a very young age. He is a shining example of how your circumstances do not have to define you, and that it is possible to move away from feeling like a victim of your life circumstances so that you can actually live a life by your own design. Rodman shares some amazing practical tips on how to find your purpose and become what he calls an outlier. All of which and more you can find again in his book, so please go grab your copy of it after you're done listening to the episode. Sit back and enjoy this conversation with 2 old friends kicking it old school, and I'll catch you on the other side. Hi, Rodman, my oldest friend that I've had on the podcast so far out of everybody.
We have known each other for quite some time, haven't we?
Yeah, I was trying to do the math in my head this morning, and I think it was probably, I know it was when I was in elementary school because I was playing softball and you were the umpire. So you probably would have been early junior high school. So that would have been late 70s, early 80s. So it's been a minute.
It has been a minute. I wasn't only umpiring. I used to pitch to you girls. I mean, I had
That's
to go out on
right.
the mound, and boy, I used to get some of these gals who would have a comeback right to the mound and just drill me at times. But it was great. I enjoyed doing that. It was one of the things that I think about a lot in life, going back and being able to work with the kids and do that kind of thing. And I was a kid myself at that time. I just wasn't that much older than you. I don't want to make it sound like I'm that much older, but for criminy sakes, it was some good times.
Yeah, you were just 2 years older, so we weren't.
I know, right?
You probably dated girls in my class later, not elementary school, but later. So it's just 2 years. But you did feel, I do remember having a sense of feeling like you were emotionally older. And my mom just adored you. She always kind of, yeah, like I feel very privileged to have a lot of my friends from Lexington, from elementary and high school still around, not only because they knew me and we have all that history going back and forth, but because they know my mom. And so once in a while I get people sharing stories with me about my mom that I didn't even know.
Yeah, she was great. She's one of those people who kind of was tough, but she was beautiful, right? I mean, she was one of those people who was also funny and also ambitious. And I don't know, I loved your mom. She was, some people are very flat. Your mother was never flat.
No.
Your mother she was very, very emotional in everything she did. And I love that about her.
Yeah, and she was not always the most popular mom, which I really have appreciated that role modeling as I've gotten older that I didn't really think about when I was younger. Because when you're younger and your parents ruffle feathers, it's kind of embarrassing. But as I've gotten older, I'm like, no, I want to be more like my mom because she didn't cater to everybody and their whims. Like I remember when we were playing softball. Do you remember Andrea Franzen?
I do.
Yeah, she had Down syndrome and my mom was adamant about putting her into play.
Yeah.
And there were so many parents that pitched a fit about that. And my mom would not tolerate it. She said, Andy is going to play because she's here to have fun and we are all here to have fun. So yeah,
just you telling that to me just gives me goosebumps because I do remember. And that's the thing is like she believed what she believed in. She wasn't afraid to say what she believed in. If she thought something was wrong, she was going to tell you it was wrong. If she thought something was right, she was going to give you a hug and pat you on the back. And that's just how she lived. And I think more people need to live that way, especially right now. So many people are kind of cowering in the corners instead of coming out and really just being true to what they believe and what they think.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think we could all take a page from her mom, from my mom, and from your mom too. I mean, I don't remember your mom as well. I didn't get to interact with her as much, but we're going to talk about your mom a little bit too. But we have that in common. Not only did we grow up together, but we both have moms who have passed on. And so we have a lot of overlap in our stories, and we're going to cover some of that today. And before we do, though, I wanted you to notice, I don't know if you can see, I'm going to lower the screen a little bit. I have on not only orange and black to kind of shout out because we're both Minutemen, and those were the colors of our high school, the Lexington Minutemen.
You were actually a Minute Maid, but whatever.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, I was gonna say I felt like more of a man than some of the guys, but yeah. But this shirt, I don't know where this shirt came from. Honestly, it was something I found in all my mom's stuff after she passed. It says Norman Gibbs School of Modern Mechanism, and my dad and my grandpa were mechanics.
Yeah.
So I don't know if this is something that she had made or somebody had made, but I remembered it was in the closet today, and I thought, oh, it's orange and black, so I'm gonna wear it to honor
The old orange and black.
high school heritage. What god awful colors for a high school team.
I know,
Anyway.
but it's okay. Come on. It wasn't that bad.
Were you in band, by the way?
I was in band.
I thought I had a memory of you being in band because I was in flag corps, captain of the flag corps team.
You know, it's funny because like I did all the sports. I was in football, track, basketball, all that. And that kind of, overlapped a little bit with band. So like when they were doing the marching band, I was usually on the sidelines because I wasn't going to be marching or, so I did do band. I'm glad I did it because it was a great experience. But I didn't do a lot of the stuff that, like you were flag corps, so halftime you were out on the field, twirling the flag, doing your thing. But I feel like, I didn't, no regrets, of course, but band was a great experience, but I didn't get the full experience of band. But it was great to learn. Just being able to. I've always thought about what it'd be like just to pick up an instrument again. Could I still play it, or would I just fumble my way through? I just don't know.
What did you play in band?
I played a baritone. You know what a baritone is? It's like a small tuba.
Oh, wow. No, I don't think How did you pick that up?
I don't know. I also played the electric bass. I switched to that for a little bit, which was kind of more fun. But yeah, I don't know. It's just one of those things where I think I started off like on a trombone or something like that. I mean, that's just such a weird instrument anyway, but I don't know.
That's funny. And weren't you homecoming king?
No.
You weren't?
No, I was way too attractive for that.
Well, you were definitely popular. Like you were sort of a step above me in terms of popularity. Like I got along with everybody, but you were definitely one of the more popular kids in high school.
I just never really thought about popularity. I still don't. You know what I mean? It's kind of like you don't think about. I don't do anything because I want somebody to recognize this, or I want to be popular, I want to be accepted, or whatever. I just kind of do me. You know, live my life like me, and if people like that, great. And if I'm not their thing, that's fine too.
Well, and I mention that because I feel like those systems when we were growing up end up impacting us so much in life. Like I was having a conversation with another guest on the podcast the other day about how in elementary school, my best friend at the time just decided at recess one day that she wasn't going to be my friend anymore. And those kinds of deep childhood woundings, I think, end up having an impact on us later in life. So I know you didn't necessarily think of yourself as popular or try to be popular, but what do you think it is about you that sort of allowed you to be popular back then?
I don't know. I'm somewhat of a freak. I still am a freak. Somebody asked me that the other day. They said, "Hey, what do you do?" And I was just like, I said, "Well, you don't really want to know. It's pretty a lot of stuff." And I just said, "Listen, I'm a freak. I'm just different." It's kind of one of those things too. It's there are people that are very self-serving in life, right? We've got those people. But I've always kind of been on that opposite end of the spectrum. It's kind of like we live in this incredible world of abundance. There's so many incredible people in the world. Why would I want to try to, number one, gather everything for myself when I can feed, the people mentally or emotionally or whatever it might be every single day? So I've always been more of an outward person than an inward person in that. And I think some of the people who are less popular are very self-centric. Meaning it's about me. The stuff around me doesn't matter so much. I'm going to look out for my own interests. I'm not going to look out for these other people's interests. So I've always just thought, if you get up in the world and you're always going to be taking care of yourself if you get up every day to try to take care of others, right? I'll always, things could go to hell in a handbasket. My businesses could go away. Everything could go away. But if I've always put into the world, I'm always going to be taken care of. Somebody's going to be there for me or I'll get picked back up. So it's just been very different. And I'm not overly competitive either. It's like I like to compete. I like the sports aspects in that, but I'm not going to try to do something at somebody else's expense, right? Where some people get so darn competitive in life that it's like they don't want you to do well. I want everybody to do well. I want everybody who comes into my life, who I'm surrounded by, who's just a part of my journey. Because, let's be honest, at the end of the day, this journey is really freaking short, right? And at the end of the day, the house that we live in is not going to matter. The cars that we drive aren't going to matter. None of this crap. My couches, my chairs, everything I have around me right now, they're all going to be in antique shops or what have you. And somebody's going to own my home. Somebody's going to be living here. Maybe they're going to demo everything that I've put into it at some point, because that's just what life is, right? And the thing about it is, if you're not getting up every single day and just thinking to yourself, what can I do to put into people? What can I do to maybe support other people's journeys and be a part of it? Just get that joy of loving people and experiencing people. There's nothing better than that.
And that seems like something you have always had that did make you different, because as you said, you weren't competitive. A lot of people in high school, I remember, had that almost mean-spirited, oftentimes competitive edge, and you never had that. I never, ever had any sense from you that you were mean-spirited or wanted to belittle people or be better than. You were just somebody who genuinely cared about other people. And I think, if anything, that's what made you different, is that, and probably, quote, popular too, is because everybody could sense that you genuinely do care. And at the same time, that didn't come easily. You've had to overcome a lot of things in your childhood too. And I wanted to maybe dive into just a couple of those, because I think
Sure.
they're important pieces of your journey. And I don't want people to look at you and think, oh, Rodman, he's had it so easy all his life, and look at him now, he's so successful. That was not the case. So let's start with the fact that you, like me, didn't grow up with a lot of money. So tell me about what your family life was like growing up in Lexington.
Yeah, no, on the outside, you would never know that how little money we actually had, but on the inside, I always knew the struggle. And, my parents divorced when I was young and such, and went on their own ways. My mom moved out to Kansas City with my two siblings at the time. And then my dad, of course, it was he and I sitting there in Lexington, Nebraska, and he was sending child support away. And he's, my dad was an educator, so he was the high school principal at that time. And they didn't make a lot of money. I mean, I think salaries were like 25 grand a year or something back then. But out of that 25 grand, he was having to send off like $600 a month, for child support. And so there was very little money there. And then when my parents separated too, my dad remarried, and then they separated. They got back together and such. But while they were separated, it was he and I in this little dinky apartment, and we had no money. We didn't have any money for food. We could barely get the rent. And the cafeteria ladies, I probably shouldn't say this, they'll probably come back and get us now, but at the end of the day, whatever we had for school lunch, the cafeteria ladies would pack up whatever extras they had for the day, and they just sent them home for us. So we had something, for food at night. So yeah, it's one of those things where people say, well, and this is certainly not a pity party, right? I'm not saying, hey, pity me because we didn't have any money. But the thing about it is like, I really, really appreciate the things that I have right now in life because I had so little back then. And, a lot of people who've got a lot of abundance early on, those folks might grow up and they might not have that same appreciation as like you and I, where we've gone in and we've worked our butts off for it. We got up relentlessly. We've done everything that we can to make our way to be a part. For me, it's like my family. I want to make sure that I can give my family the things that I never had. Of course, I always hope my children, I hope they don't look and go, I hope they're not the ones who are going, oh, we were very well taken care of and they don't have that appreciation. I don't think that's true. I think that they're being raised properly so that they understand, how important it is to really have respect for the things that we have in life.
Do you feel like growing up with less money instilled more scarcity in you or more abundance?
I think it made me it makes me worry less about if I went back there. Like, I know that I'd be okay, if that makes sense. So like, I always talk about this first job in Nebraska I ever had. I was 12 years old. I might have even been a little younger, but I was young. And you did one of two things. You either detasseled corn out there, right, which was just a horrible job. But I had the second horrible job, which was what they call, we'd get rid of these noxious weeds. They're called musk thistles. They've got this flowering head on the top, and farmers have to get rid of them. Otherwise, they'll just spread like wildfire. So the county would make them remove them. So $3.10 an hour. I would go walk through these fields. You'd have to pop the head off of the flower, put it in a bag, and then cut down the thistle. And we would do that. We'd leave at 5 a.m. in the morning. We'd be done by noon, $3.10 an hour. And I told my dad, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore, Dad. And it's tough, and we'd run across rattlesnakes. Yeah, it's just nuts. And my dad said, well, that's fine, but you got to find something else to do. And so I said, well, what I did is I got this rubber mat and I made this template that was like basically a rectangle and then numbers. And then I went door to door offering to paint numbers on people's curbs, their addresses on their curbs for $5 a curb. And I started doing 4 to 5 of those an hour. So I was making $20 to $25 an hour at age 12.
Which was good money back then.
I know, but that's where I found entrepreneurship. I was like, oh my gosh, I can go work for these groups, leave at 5 a.m. in the morning until noon at $3.10 an hour, or I can get up when I want to get up, go out, knock on doors, and paint these addresses. And matter of fact, it was actually a little bit more than my dad was making as a principal per hour. So my dad was kind of like going, hey, wait a minute. It's like, you're making more money than I am per hour right now at 12. But at the same time, that was one of those things that really opened my eyes up to entrepreneurship, going, you can either go at somebody else's will and their wages, or you can really go and figure out entrepreneurship, how to get on your own, how to do your own thing. And from then on, honestly, even though, like I said, we had such little money over growing up and such, it's kind of like I've always known that things can go to hell in a handbasket, but I'm still always going to be okay. Because I'll find a way. I'll find a way to make that money, whether I have to hustle, whether it's a side hustle, whatever it might be. You just got to find a way to make it work.
Yeah, because back then it wasn't I imagine you didn't think of it as entrepreneurship. It was just a way to make a buck and have money to go to Dairy Queen and go out. That was it. And really what it was is creativity. And I think from an outsider's perspective, that is what I see as the through line throughout your life, is that you not only have that natural tendency for creativity, you also don't let it be suppressed. You just follow it. And we're going to come back and talk about that a little bit. But I'm so glad that you told that story, because that was one of the stories I was going to ask you about, because it's in your book, The Outlier Mindset, a guide to
Look at
living
all the
with...
little Post-it notes you got in there.
Total attorney fashion. I tagged the crap out of the sucker. A guide to living with purpose and evolving exponentially. So that's one of the stories that you tell in there. And I didn't have that when I was younger. I mean, honestly, if I am truly honest, I lean more toward not wanting to do a damn thing. I saw an interview with Matt LeBlanc from Friends a while back, and somebody asked him, you know, if you could do anything you wanted, what would you do? And he said, nothing. Like nothing. And I feel like that's me. So for somebody like me, the creativity is important. And I haven't always been, I think, the hard worker that you were. I worked at a flower shop in high school. I never detasseled corn or worked at McDonald's. So a little bit different in terms of, I don't want to say work ethic, but just sort of how we looked at working growing up. And it served you well. Like that creativity to think of your own ideas is what has made you a serial entrepreneur. You mentioned your parents getting divorced, which is one of the things I also wanted to talk about, because we are both parents or children of divorced parents. How did your parents' divorce impact you now, looking back in your journey as an entrepreneur?
You know, there's definitely impacts. I mean, divorce impacts kids, period, right? I mean, the more stability that you can provide for children, I mean, they need it more than ever, right? But unfortunately, the other side of that coin is not everybody's meant to be together. And sometimes maybe the situation actually improves when people are not in the same house together. So there's these balances that you got to look at. But you know, when my parents divorced, my mother moved to Kansas City. So we were in Lexington, Nebraska. She moved about 6 hours away with my younger brother and my younger sister. So they separated the kids. I was with my dad. They went with her. So I think that distance made it tough. I was pretty close to my mom. Still, you know, even when later in life and before she died, we were very close because she was an incredible person. But at the end of the day, I still remember, you know, she had cancer, and when she was in hospice, that was one of the biggest things that was weighing on her. When she was talking to me about the journey, she's like, she kept apologizing. She's like, I'm sorry, I didn't fight for you. I'm sorry, I didn't fight for you. Sorry, I'm going to get a little emotional. But at the end of the day, you know, I was exactly where I needed to be. Like my dad needed me to be with him, right? And so you get that dynamic where, you know, I have no regrets about it. And I told her, I was like, Mom, no regrets with me. I was like, you know, we got put in a really bad situation. We were doing what we had to do, but you know, Dad needed me too. And so I said, don't feel bad that maybe you didn't fight for me. I know that it wasn't about me. I know it wasn't you rejecting me by not wanting to take me with you. I know that it was a lot more complex than that. So, you know, I know that for her, it was a lot more impactful than maybe it was for me. Not that it was not impactful. I mean, you know, having your parents not together is always impactful and such. It was, you know, it was some tough years.
Yeah. And your mom was 69 when she passed. How old were you?
Oh, gosh, I would have been in my mid 30s, how old am I right now? Wait a minute. Let me do the math.
You're 2 years older than me. Are you 55?
I am 55. I'll be 56 this year. But no, you know, I was probably actually, because when she first got her cancer, my daughter was just born, Sophia, who's about 20 years old right now. And then it went away. It went into remission. And then it kind of came back with vengeance about 10 years later. So that would have been about 10 years ago, probably. I was probably in my 40s.
Yeah. So you really kind of lost your mom twice.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, if you think about it, when she left and then when she passed, you know, it's one of those things where, again, you don't really, I don't think of it that way. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think about losing her twice. I try to focus, of course, on all the great times I had. I mean, I had wonderful times with her. And my memories, if you say, well, what are your memories? My memories are not bad. My memories are all beautiful, good. Awesome. So again, it's one of those things where I look at it and I don't really think about losing her twice. The one thing that I hate most is that my children didn't have more time with her, because she was such an incredible spirit, an incredible soul. And my kids, I mean, oh my God, my mom was, I get so emotional talking about my mom. She was such a good person that my kids would have just been eaten up by her. And then, of course, now we've got this flower farm here in Colorado that my wife has. My mom was so incredibly creative. And, I could just imagine that if she was still alive, she would be out here for weeks on end, just being in the flower farm or in the fields, or taking her creativity and working with my wife. And I think that that's something that I probably think about more than anything in missing her.
Do you still feel your mom with you?
It's interesting. These are silly things, by the way. But yes, I mean, I'm always, I don't know. Do you remember the sound? This you may or may not, but the locust. Do you remember the locust in Nebraska?
Love
the
it.
cicadas, right?
Love that sound.
It's this hum, right? It's this slow in and out hum, loud. At night we'd lay in bed and there'd be the sound of the cicadas, right? So oddly now, and I talk to my mom, and I'll talk to my grandparents all the time, like when I'm just still with myself and, asking for strength and guidance from them and such. When I'm laying there, it's dead silent, but I hear the sound of the cicadas at night, and they put me to sleep at night. And I can't explain it other than there's probably some medical thing that I got to go get checked out. I don't know. But I always ask my wife, I'm like, do you hear that? Do you hear that humming? And she's like, you're crazy. I'm like, well, yeah, I am that too, but still. So yeah, do I feel like she's with me? I do, in really strange ways though. And I'll tell you another little story that's pretty amazing. Before my mom died, she was with my wife was with my mom. And my mom told my wife, she said, listen, when I cross over, I'll come back as a little bird just to let you know that I made it, that I'm okay, right? And that I'm here. And so, oddly, it's just almost hard to believe what happened. But a week later, I got a call from my wife, and she had gone into our bedroom. And I say a week later, a week after the funeral. So we came back. A week later, she comes into the bedroom, and on her side of the bed, on the headboard of the bed, is a little bird. In the house, a live little bird. I have no idea. Who knows? Maybe it's just coincidence. But there is this little bird perched on her side of the bed, sitting there. And my wife called me, and she's like, I smacked it. No, she didn't smack it. But
Gina would not smack the bird.
No, she didn't smack the bird. But it was one of those things where it's like, oh my gosh, there's a lot of things in life that we will just never, ever understand. We think we know so much, but really in the grand scheme of things, we know nothing. We absolutely know nothing.
You had never shared that story with me, and I'm so glad that you did. It actually gave me goosebumps, and I say that all the time on the podcast. When I get goosebumps, that's my indicator that there is something there. Personally, for what it's worth, I 100% believe that was your mom giving you a sign. And I know that you're a skeptic, which I think is great. And I'm going to mention this again on the podcast. I mentioned on another episode just recently, there's a book I read called Signs by a woman named Laura Lynn Jackson that I would recommend you put in your nightstand of your big list of books that you're reading, because I believe that was your mom communicating with her. So I love that story.
And a skeptic is kind of an interesting word, because like I don't see myself as being a skeptic, but I think I question everything, right? Maybe a little agnostic.
Isn't that the definition of skeptic?
Maybe more than agnostic. I don't know. Maybe. Well, I guess a skeptic would be like, oh, I don't think that could be, or that's not true. For me, it's not a matter of not thinking something is true. It's me going, I know that we don't have all the answers. And I know that, people who claim to have those answers, there's, whether it be, different religions, or whether it be different people's thoughts or ideas. I mean, at the end of the day, we'll know, I think, or maybe we won't. But for me, it's kind of one of those things where I always I think through it and go, I believe there's something there. But if you think of just the actual massiveness of even the universe. I mean, there's so many things that we will never be able to comprehend. And I always tell people, it's always be thinking. I'm not saying that it's not right or it's not true, or but always be thinking. Don't ever take things at face value, especially when it comes to life and living and death and everything, because we know so little in the grand scheme of things. And a lot of people, I'll probably get the email saying, well, just read the Bible and go with that. But there are so many different ideas and thoughts when it comes to religion, even what God looks like, right? Who's to say this person's right or that person's wrong? All I say is just open up your minds. And I'm a Christian, I go to church, but I also open up my mind all the time and go, okay, I'll pray. I pray and I ask for guidance. I ask for strength. I ask for, solutions. I ask for just all that stuff. But I think the second that we get really rigid in our thinking and say, this is the answer, when we really don't have all the answers, then I think you lose the ability to think. And then you lose the ability to really come in and make your own judgments and your own opinions on your beliefs.
Absolutely. And that, to me, sounds like curiosity and just being open-minded and constantly asking the questions, like you said. That has served you well, again, your whole life, including into your entrepreneurial journey. There's one more thing I wanted to come back to in your story of growing up, because I'm pulling all these threads together in what I see as you as somebody who not only has been curious and creative and skillful at building businesses, but also very resilient. And that's and you tell the story again in your book. But at the time your parents were getting divorced, you were also personally navigating some abuse that happened to you. And I was wondering if you might be willing to share a little bit about that story too.
100%. I'm very open about it because I want people that are experiencing this, if they're kids or if they're adults, to have the courage to also embrace what happened to them as children. If they've experienced sexual abuse. And for me, it was a teacher in our hometown. Matter of fact, I think you lived right across the road from me.
You lived right across the highway from us.
Yeah,
Yep.
where you guys were living. And, it was one of those things where predators like to prey on families that are going through struggles or kids that are going through struggles or whatever it might be. They'll find that kid who maybe they can exploit a weakness that's happening in their lives. And that's what this person did. He was a teacher at the high school. He's a history teacher. And, at that time I was 10 years old. I was very young. But he had, of course, my dad was the high school principal. He befriended my father. He, got in good graces with him. He gained his trust. And then, as a kid, he's like, I want your kid to come work for me. And he had some, these dog kennels. He was a hunter and such. And I'm going to tell you right now, too, I know for a fact that I was not the only one.
No,
I might have
there's
been
never
the
just
only
one.
one who brought it to the light. I might have been, and such. But I got to the point, literally I got to a point when I was 22 years old, and I was really able to understand and be strong enough to stand up to it. I took it to the authorities, too. And so at that time, I went to the authorities, and they asked me for a list of people that I thought he'd abused. By the way, he had been a school teacher. He was in his 60s when he was abusing me. I can't imagine how many kids he abused in his entire history, because he was a basketball coach back in the day. And it's kind of like, it's almost sickening, but I gave the authorities a big list. I know it was over 50 people. It was probably between 50 and 100 kids who had kind of had that same pattern that I had had. And the thing was, though, when they were making the calls, nobody would stand into or leaned into it. You know what I mean? It was more because it's embarrassing. People are like, I don't want to admit to the abuse, or I don't want to, I don't want people to look differently about me as a human being. But it wasn't about that for me. At the end of the day, the authorities, they didn't do anything about it. They asked him to leave town, I believe, because he did move after that. And then I spent the next, I want to say maybe 35 years making sure that he was in check. So I would call the local authorities where he was at in South Dakota and say, hey, I don't want anything. I'm not asking you to do anything. I just want you to remind you that this person lives in your community, and I want to make sure that no kids are going into his house or he's not taking kids in, that kind of thing. And I did that for 30 some odd years. And then oddly enough, I had this dream that he died. 2 days later, my dad calls me and says, hey, such and such died 2 days ago. Like, I dreamt his death, which is crazy to me, which also kind of tells you about this energetic connections that we have in life, right? That again, that I don't know. I can't explain that. That's an unexplainable thing to me. But for me, it was about the healing came in, that I actually went just a couple years ago. My dad, of course, you can imagine when I told my dad about the abuse, he was, I can't even tell you how upset and mad he was. But
when did you tell your dad, by the way?
What's that?
When did you tell your dad?
I told him at the same time I went to the authorities. So he went to the authorities.
Okay, so not to your 20s. Yeah.
So he and I both went, and reported it. those kind of things. But he was, as you can imagine,
Yeah.
as a dad,
Yeah.
I can't even imagine. I don't know what I would do in that situation if it was my kids, but he probably handled it better than I would have. But we loaded up the car. We were up on a road trip anyway, up by Minnesota, and he was buried up in Mitchell, South Dakota. And so I had a stone made that just said, "I forgive you." And a couple of years ago, we drove there, and I went and placed that at his gravesite, and I'd always, like I said, it's one of those things where I never felt like it was holding me back. I always asked the question, because I even think about a lot of the kids who maybe he abused, who spiraled downwards. How was I able to climb upwards when so many other people spiraled downwards, right? And I can't figure that one out. I don't know. I don't know if it's just how we're built or what it might be, but. For me, even though I felt like I've always been well adjusted and been able to handle that, it was a good closure just to go and place that stone at his gravesite and then move on.
What did forgiving him do for you?
I don't know. Like I said, I always felt like I never held on to it. Like it wasn't a big, cross that I was always bearing, or just it wasn't dragging me down ever. And I think kind of my empowerment came, in the fact that, like I said, I always felt like if I didn't make that call to the authorities and I didn't do something about it, like I always had to hang my hat on how many kids did I prevent from this happening to because the authorities made that call to him, right? And maybe scared him enough to know that people were watching. Or how many kids did I keep from having that done to that, when he moved to South Dakota, by making that call to putting the awareness and keeping that accountability there. So I've always, that's kind of been the almost, I don't want to call it empowerment, but it's always made me go, okay, I'm doing the right thing by what I'm doing. And that's why I'm always freely talking about it, and I still, remember his obituary when they put his obituary out. It had all these wonderful things, a war veteran, a teacher, a this, and I read it and I just said, it was a disgusting thing to me because there was so much bad in the background that nobody even knew about. And I remember people even on Facebook saying, "Oh, he was a great this or a great that," and all I could think of was, no, he wasn't. He what he did to children, the impact that he had on all these kids. And the people, again, that I know, that I personally know, that I grew up with, that spiraled downwards, I look at those people and I go, gee, many, that guy had that direct downward impact on those kids that couldn't climb themselves back up. And unfortunately, they didn't have the ability to do anything but spiral down.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that story, because when you first shared that with me, it's been maybe 15 years ago or so when we reconnected, I think through Facebook, and I was living in DC and you were out for a conference and we got together for dinner and you shared that story with me. And I was completely shocked because, again, he lived right across the highway. And so all of this was going on right across the road from where I grew up, and had no idea that you and so many other young men in our very small town, Lexington was 7,000 people at the time, were experiencing that kind of abuse. And it broke my heart. And it also, I don't know if inspired is the right word, but I hear you claiming your power and owning that part of your story where so many others haven't been able to do that.
But that's why we have to tell the story.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're talking about the one man across the street. That's the one man we know of.
Exactly.
When I put things like, I did put a post out, and I didn't call this person out by name upon their death, but I did put something out there. And I can't even tell you how many other people reached out to me and said, it wasn't even from this same person. They're like, this same thing happened to me. This same thing happened to me. And for me, it was that eye-opening. Who's that other guy across the street that you're talking about, right? And the only way that we're going to really get people on edge or to change that is by being vocal about it, by talking about it, by saying, hey, if this happened to you, stand up to it. Yeah, it sucks. Yeah, it might be a little bit embarrassing, but it's only embarrassing if you make it embarrassing. I don't feel embarrassed ever when I talk about it. I feel strong. I feel like I was able to lean into it. I was able to say, this is not right. I was able to point at it. And by doing those things, it literally strengthens you. I have nothing to be embarrassed about. I was a 10-year-old boy who had no idea what the hell was going on. Yeah. And there was an adult who knows better. That person should be embarrassed. Those actions should be embarrassing. And I still remember, even when I turned it in the authorities, he didn't know he did not know who turned it in. And I got a phone call from him about a week after I turned in the authorities, and he said, "Listen, you might get a call from the Dawson County Sheriff's Department, and it's about this. And when you do, I just want to know what you're going to say." And I said, "Well, I'm going to tell them the truth. I'm going to tell them what happened." He says, "Well, I didn't do anything wrong. All I do is love these kids. It's, everything I'm doing is okay." He was saying it's okay. And I told him, I was like, "Well, that's perfect then." I said, "I'll tell them the truth, because if it's okay, the truth will be fine." Right. Mm-hmm. And of course, he hung up the phone on me. And he might have known at that time, okay, this is the guy who turned me in. But I didn't really care. I mean, it was, again, it's like people, whatever that is in their brains that makes them think that that's okay, as long as they continue to justify it and think it's okay, they're going to keep doing the same damn thing. That's why you got to hold people accountable when they're doing things wrong, or if they are bad people. Otherwise, it's just going to be the next person's going to be a victim, and then the next person's going to be a victim, and then the next person. And guess what? A lot of those victims will then become perpetrators. Right. There's a cycle to it, right? And I'm blessed in that I'm strong enough where I'm not a part of that cycle. It's not even something that goes through my little brain. But these other little kids, who don't know better and think maybe that's okay or a part of life, that just perpetuates the cycle.
Well, you, in telling your story, not only held him accountable, but were able to connect with other people, who had something similar happen to them. And that's the power of telling our stories, is that our stories are very unique and personal to us. And we are also connected through the pain that we experience in life, including the joy that we experience in life. And so by telling our stories, we can help other people connect to their pain and also connect with us. So I think it's really powerful that you've done that. And I'm so glad we went a little bit deeper into, our history together and some of your history, because when you look back on that, the fact that you didn't grow up with a lot of money, you had parents who got divorced, you experienced this abuse, you had every cause to grow up thinking you were a victim of your circumstances, and you have not. And your book talks about what it takes to become somebody who is not a victim of their circumstances. So we're going to get into that a little bit, but I'm curious if you can think of the primary factor or primary driving force or pivotal point in your life that made you realize, I don't have to be a victim of these circumstances.
Well, here's the power of a book, the power of just books in general. Somebody put the Wayne Dyer's book, Your Erroneous Zones, in my hands. At a young age. I mean, I was probably 13, 14. I probably had no right to be reading that book at that age. Even it's not an adult book, but it's not a book a typical 13 or 14-year-old kid's going to pick up, right? And going through that book, I always tell people that book somewhat saved my life, because, it was, if you think about, 10 from age 10 to 12 being abused during that exact same time, your parents are divorcing, and then your dad remarries, and there's all the internal conflict with, between a blended family, and then just all this stuff. It kind of had me wondering, it's like, is this life? Is this, what it is? And that Wayne Dyer book, Your Erroneous Zones, was all about, how you take information in and then process it, and then what you do with it, right? About being able to say, well, I can't help that this is going to happen to me, but I can change how I react to what's happening to me. Or I can take my thinking and think differently about what's happening, and try to find out how you can adjust it internally with yourself to process it, and then to make your situation better. And so that book alone, I would say, was probably the biggest pivot point in my life. One of the biggest regrets I have is the fact that I didn't get to talk to Wayne Dyer and say, thank you. Thank you for basically what I would say, almost saved my life. And, of course, we lost him a while back, but he was such an incredible human being. So that was a really bad, I'd say probably one of the biggest turning points, where I understood at that point that I was going to be responsible for how I felt, how I received information, how I processed information, how I got up in my day, and knew that not every day is going to be great, but what I do in turn when I'm not having that great day is going to make all the difference. And so I would say that was probably the biggest turning point. And I tell people talk about writing books all the time. I love writing books, because I always say, if you've got something up here to share with the world, What if Wayne Dyer didn't write that book? What if somebody didn't put that book in my hand at that time? What would my life be like? I mean, maybe it would be a different book, or maybe it'd be a different journey. I don't know. But thank God he wrote that book. He had it up here. He wrote it. He gave it to me. And in turn, it was a big turning point. One of those turning points in my life that I'll look back on and go all the time, it would fill me up inside to have all that information. And I hope, anybody who's got that too. And I had something with my book. I had a kid. We were at this the Summit of Greatness event, which is Lewis Howes's event out in Los Angeles. And Lewis is a friend of mine, and I get to go out there all the time and be a part of his events and such. But there was a kid. Matter of fact, it was my publisher's son who had read my book, and he came up to me and said, "This is the best book that I've ever read in my life." And he started quoting things out of my book to me. And I mean, that's, as an author or somebody who wants to put into the world, it was one of the most meaningful things. I mean, it could have just been only him who read my book, and maybe it is, I don't know. But at the end of the day, here it is, this kid who I was able to have an impact on. And I can't even tell you how that just fills you up inside. That's why you write books. So if you have something in you that needs to come out, that you need to put into the world, do it. Don't sit on it. Do it, because there's that person out there that needs exactly what you have to say. You're best set to serve the person that you once were in life. And if you're not serving the person that you once were and those people who need you most, I think it's a disservice.
It's so cool how Wayne Dyer's book, when you were 12 or 13, had that ripple effect and planted that seed for you to write 3 books, including the one we're going to talk about that you were just referring to, the Outlier mindset. So let's shift into talking about that, because it is a really freaking powerful book. I agree with that kid 100%. And what amazes me about this, I'm somebody who obviously is a more long form kind of gal. You have been able, in this tiny little book, I mean, it's 100 and something pages, 120, not even, 100 and less than 150 pages, condense some really heavy topics into very digestible pages. And I really love that. So people can literally read this in 2 hours, if that. And so let's start with the title. What you have as your philosophy of life, which is to be an outlier. Tell me what an outlier is.
I always tell people to think of it as a big bell curve. Like life is a bell curve. And you've got, of course, you've got your left side, and this is not a political left or a political right, right? We don't want to talk about that right now. But you've got your bell curve that goes up, and the majority of people are sitting in the middle of this big bell curve. And then on the fringes, you've got outliers. So on the right side, you've got people who are doing incredibly good things. They're different. They're, like I said earlier, I'm a freak, right? So it's kind of like, I love being a freak. I don't want to be living life in the middle of this bell curve. Because it's too easy. Life is easy in the middle of the bell curve, right? It's easy to get comfortable. It's easy to just kind of go through the motions. But then you've got people on that left side of the bell curve, those other outliers, and those are the ones who are usually sitting in prison or doing things that they should not be doing. They are different. They are not like the rest of society. But my abuser, for an example, would be sitting on the left side of that bell curve. So for me, the thing about it is life is so short. I mean, I even look at it, I can't believe we are as old as we are. When you reminded me that, I am 55. Oh my gosh. When I was young, when people were 55, they were old. They were old. And my kids, I guess now, even still call me an old man. But it's kind of like, the thing about it is, so many people say, I'm going to do it tomorrow. I'm going to try this. I want to try that. But they kick the can down the road, and they kick the can down the road. And then all of a sudden they're 60 years old, or they're 70 years old, or they're 80 years old, or they're on that deathbed. And they're starting to think about all the things they wish they had done, all the things that they wish they had tried, instead of looking back going, well, man, I sucked at this, but at least I tried it. Or, man, I crushed that. The thing about it is so many people get so comfortable in the middle of that bell curve. But think about life if more and more people were operating outside of that bell curve. Think about the advancements in maybe health or technology or whatever it might be. If people really started getting out of that comfort zone, started pushing the limits of thought, of development, of inventing, of whatever it might be. But unfortunately, we get caught up in the society of, I get the house payment, I got the car payment, I got kids, you know what I mean? And all of a sudden, we're in this cycle that is really hard to break out of. And I'm not saying it's easy to be an outlier. But it's kind of one of those things where I say, I'm not telling you to be an outlier and go quit your job tomorrow and go do this. I'm saying if you need the side hustle, do the side hustle. Go start building whatever it is, maybe in that time that you're spending in front of that TV, that's worthless time. And maybe maybe I should take that back. Maybe it's not worthless. Maybe people need that to every once in a while breathe, right? Or to have that. I watch some mindless stuff at times because my brain gets so going at times. I need to turn on just kind of some comedy just to kind of take me down a level. But so many people get caught up in these routines and they can't break out of them. And I always say, if you're really going to be an outlier, you got to do the work. It's not easy. You got to try to break out of those cycles and try to break out of that comfort zone to do things that sometimes make you a little bit uptight or make you, uncomfortable. Let's say that.
When did it dawn on you that you were an outlier who was outside of that bell curve?
Well, like I said, I hate using the word freak. No, I don't like it. Matter of fact, I don't mind
fly your freak flag. It's okay.
I'll fly my freak flag. It's kind of like one of those things where I just did things differently, right? And, if you think about, what you're doing in life, sometimes it doesn't work out. I mean, there's so many businesses I've started and tried and did not work. People look at me and go, well, how are you so successful at everything that you do? And I was like, are you kidding me? You don't see all the crap that I failed on. You don't see all those businesses that didn't work or those ideas that ended up being really dumb ideas. But guess what? 2 out of 10 of them worked out really well or whatever it might be. And then you double down into what's doing really well. But some people are not built for that risk either. Even in my first marriage, I don't think my wife was built for that risk. I could go and I could go dry on paychecks for 6 months, and then in 6 months have 2 big real estate deals happen, and all of a sudden it's 2 years of salary, right? She couldn't handle that. I need to get this paycheck every 2 weeks. It's going to go into the account. We can account. It might have been making half as much money, but it's just kind of like she was not built to handle that or to be a part of that. And I'm just built that way. I mean, I think from painting those curves. Again, I know that it's like I could go make $3.10 an hour, or I could just go out and knock on those doors and make my own. And I've always just chosen in life to go knock on those doors.
And I think that concept of being an outlier and your book is so critical for people of our generation, because we are at that stage now where we're opening up to the fact that, I have spent the last 20 or 30 years succumbing to societal expectations, doing what other people tell me to do or expected me to do, pleasing everybody else, not tapping into my own creativity, all the things, right? We just check the boxes. And then we get to our 40s and 50s and we're like, holy shit, now what? Time's running out. And then we think, it's too late. Now I'm too old to do anything. And so I think your book is a good invitation for people to learn how to become an outlier. And you say it's for 2 people, the people who know that they're an outlier and how they can continue to embrace those qualities to make their best life possible. And for the people who maybe don't know or don't think they're an outlier now, and how they can start to lean into that. So let's start with, how could we get people to see whether they are living a life of an outlier now or not? What's the indicator that you are an outlier now, or that you may want to start leaning into being an outlier?
Well, the first thing is alignment with what we'll call purpose here. And some people don't like that word, some people like it, but it's kind of like, what lights you up, right? What do you get excited about? Are you sitting there? Are you getting up every day and are you getting in a car and going through the motions, doing work, coming back, having dinner, sitting by the TV, going to bed, going, God, I got to go to work? Are you living for the weekends? Mm-hmm. Or are you getting up every day and going, honest to God, I don't even think about weekends. I think about, because I'm going full blast all the time. It's like, but I'm doing what I love, right? Because I love what I do. If I'm building something, it's kind of like even my wife. I love the fact that my wife is sitting there with this flower farm. She's like so aligned with what she loves and who she is and her purpose. And, when you're that, she doesn't think about, I'm going to go pull some weeds, or I'm going to go do, she got up this morning and looked me in the eyes and she said, I'm pretty pissed at you right now. I'm like, well, why are you mad at me? She's like, because, all I can think about now is business. Like, she got up and she's her brains, but that's a beautiful thing, right? Because she loves what she's doing so much that she can't get it out of her head when she's laying in bed in the morning or when she's going to bed at night, right? There's a lot of things that you have to do work-wise to be an outlier. But the first thing is going, man, what do I want to build? What's going to be my life by design? Because so many people are not living their own lives. They're living somebody else's life or by somebody else's design or what other people need or what other people want. Instead of really going, well, what do I need? What do I want? Because at the end of the day, you're going to go, when you're, again, sitting on that deathbed, I'm going to look back and go, man, all I did was go to work at this job that I didn't like, making money that maybe was good, maybe it was bad. I don't know. It really does not matter. You could be doing exactly what you want to be doing in life and making very little, but be very happy, right? Money is not the end all to anything. Or you could be sitting there making a lot of money, just kind of selling your soul day by day because you don't believe in what you're doing or you're not inspired by what you're doing or it doesn't align with who you are on the inside. So the first thing that you got to do is you got to go, if I'm going to be an outlier, maybe I'm trying to say, am I an outlier or do I want to be an outlier? The first thing you got to do is go, well, who am I? And then what kind of life do I want for me? Not for the expectations, not for society, not for what anybody else thinks you should be doing or thinking or living. None of that matters. At the end of the day, it's you and what matters with you on the inside. Because if that's not aligned, I tell people don't even bother. Because the other stuff won't matter if you don't have that down.
I have clients, friends, so many people I know who don't know what their purpose is or don't believe in purpose. Like you said, don't like that word, or don't even know where to begin to align with their purpose because they are working just to pay the bills, or they have an autoimmune disease or some other health issue, or they're a single mom and have 3 kids. So purpose is the last thing on their plate. And one of the digestible takeaways from your book that I really appreciated is that you have a 4-step process for designing a life that's aligned by your purpose. So can you walk us through what those 4 steps are to find your purpose and align?
I don't know if I remember them.
I do have them. I don't have to put you on the spot. The first one was to find your superpowers and your weaknesses.
Yeah, I mean, you got to know that, right? And that's with anything in life. I mean, I think if you don't have that figured out, you're going to have a lot of trouble. And any business I do or any group that I start to work with, I'll be very honest up front. This is what I'm really good at. These are my superpowers. This is what I'm not good at. If you want to work with me, if you need me for something, know that I'll let you down if this is the expectation on these things. But you know what? Over here, boy, I'm going to crush it. So it's okay to have weaknesses. I can't be good at everything. You can't be good at everything. Nobody can be good at everything. But my best business partners that I've ever had, matter of fact, the one that I've been with for the longest, I mean, man, our skill sets so complement one another. Where when I'm fumbling around on something, man, he is right there to pick it up for me. And that's the thing is, if you don't understand or embrace your weaknesses and then really lean into your superpowers, you could flatline. But the second that you understand that I'm not going to be great at everything, and then have somebody right there with you to help lift you up when you're failing at those things that you're not good at, boy, you can go so far.
Yeah, I don't think that's something our generation is very willing to look at, is what are our weaknesses, because we don't want to admit defeat or ask for help for that matter. We just want to DIY everything ourselves. And that ends up burning us out and allowing us to not focus in on the superpowers and the things that we're really good at. So I appreciate that invitation to ask people to actually sit down. In the book, you say, sit down with a piece of paper, draw a line, superpowers on one side, weaknesses on the other side, and start to raise that awareness. The second step is, and you kind of spoke to this, but to identify what you enjoy doing the most.
Yeah, I mean, why do we get up and spend most of our time doing shit that we don't enjoy doing?
Yeah.
Why do we do that? Again, maybe it's comfortable. Or whatever, but my gosh, like when I'm not aligned, God, I feel miserable. And of course, then you're going to drag yourself down. Then emotionally, you get drained. It's kind of like we spend 8 hours a day sleeping. Well, I try to get 8 hours. I don't know how much you sleep
because you're old.
Probably so. I thought the older you get, the less you have to sleep. But for me, I got to get 8 hours of sleep. So just think of the time in our life that we're just spending sleeping, and then we're getting up in the morning, we're driving 30 minutes to work, an hour to work, whatever it might be, or maybe you work from home. We're working an entire day, maybe not aligned, not happy doing what we're doing. We get done, we take that same commute home, maybe have some dinner, maybe have an hour or two with our family, then we go to bed. We do that over and over and over again. Why? if you hate what you're doing or if you don't like what you're doing, why are you doing it? Because at the end of the day, God, again, you're going to look back and go, God, did I live life? Did I actually live my life? Or did I just get up and go through the motions because I had to have that car or I had to have that house? I had to have this. It's ridiculous to me.
Do you find that when you ask people, well, what do you enjoy doing? Do you ever get the deer in the headlights look from people who that hasn't ever even occurred to them?
Well, yeah, because a lot of people haven't sat down with it.
Yeah.
And listen, I'm not going to criticize people because they're doing these. I mean, sometimes you just get caught in this life trap where I still have to make a house payment. I still have to pay for cars. I still have to do this. And that starts early. We're trained early for our generation. Entrepreneurship wasn't even a word in our generation, right? That's not even a word that was recognized or that people talked about for Gen Xers. It came later in life Gary Vaynerchuk talks about it all the time. Like entrepreneurship, the word itself is something that's kind of new, right?
I think Gen Xers really kind of, I don't want to say start, obviously there were entrepreneurs before Gen Xers, but I think we were a big wave of Gen X or of entrepreneurship.
I think so too. I mean, like our parents, like my dad was an educator, right? Mm-hmm. And he even says all the time to me, he goes, I don't understand what you do. And I don't understand how you do it, but whatever you're doing, just keep doing it. Because he sees the successful side of it, right? So keep doing it.
Well, and back on the things that you enjoy, I think that's such an important question. I often encourage just everybody. One of my first steps when I was trying to figure out how to be something other than a lawyer, and I thought, I don't know what else to do because I'm only trained as a lawyer. I started just keeping on my phone in my notes app a silly little things that bring me joy list. Because I think for all the reasons you said, in our society, we're not encouraged to pause and think about that or give ourselves permission to feel joy and to feel enjoyment. And so it didn't matter how silly it was, whether it was listening to music or watching birds or playing with Winnie or writing, it went on my things that bring me joy list. And I think that can start to build your muscle of tuning into the things that you enjoy, because if you've never given yourself that permission, it can be very discombobulating to think about that.
Well, and let's be honest too, it's kind of like growing up, your parents say, oh, you need to be a doctor, you need to be a lawyer, you need to be, you know what I mean? It's kind of like that press of this is what you need to be. And it's this, again, a societal expectation instead of what you expect, instead of what you want to be. And so you still got to break out of that too. I mean, just the other day, my dad gives me a lot of crap. You know my dad, he's kind of a joker, but we were on the phone. I'm kind of growing my hair right now, and I got a little, little beard going. I like it, but my dad's like, "What the hell's going on with your face and your hair? Like, you need to go get that haircut and that face shaved as soon as you." It's like, and I'm just like, "No, Dad, I'm a freak. Don't you remember?" It's the kind of thing is like, though he's joking about it. But I know that he grew up, and our parents grew up in a time where there was like, you had to have your hair cut a certain way, you had to dress a certain way, you had to this a certain way. And I'm just, and I just am just a no. I'll do what I like and what feels good for me. And the second that you start selling out what you really love doing or love being or love the activities that you love being a part of, if you start selling all that out, you've lost yourself. At that point, you've sold yourself because society expects something else from you.
Well, and you live in Colorado, so the longer hair and the scruffiness fits in. So
yeah, I just need to be smoking a doob or something, and we'd be all right.
You need a really long beard. So we have the first two steps: superpowers and weaknesses, and identify what you enjoy doing the most. And then you have different kind of checkboxes, but it's create your own checkbox system, not a societal checkbox system. And this is a really pivotal foundation of what you personally do and what you encourage other people to do. So tell us a little bit more about the checkbox system.
Yeah, the checkbox, I call them my sacred checkboxes. And they're sacred because they're yours. They're nobody else's, they're yours, right? And again, it comes back to what gives you joy in life. So you've identified, what am I happy doing? What makes me excited? And the reason I did this is it stemmed from my entrepreneurship. Like, I'm an entrepreneur through and through, but I started putting profit before passion or purpose. Right? And so what was happening is somebody would come to me with a business opportunity and I would look at the income potential, but I wouldn't think about, am I going to enjoy with that income potential? Am I going to enjoy getting up and working that business? Am I going to get up? And it was all about money versus actually doing things that I love to be doing. And I was always a yes guy. I nodded my head yes to so many things that I should not said yes to. I should have been more selective. I should have been more of a no guy. So those check boxes is what helps me set those boundaries. Meaning, when I'm talking about putting together what's meaningful to me, there were 4 things in life that I really enjoyed doing. I love teaching. So teaching people how to do things, whether it's entrepreneurship or teaching them the knowledge that I've been able to gain over my years. Investing in real estate. I've always been a real estate guy. I love investing in real estate. I love inspiring. So if I can take and impart on people my wisdom and help them maybe that are in that curve and they so desperately want to get out. If I can help them get out of that curve, I want to be doing that. And then the last thing is traveling. I love to travel. So everything, if you looked at the businesses that I have right now, if it doesn't check those boxes, I don't do it. I just say no. And I've had big opportunities that have come to me. And I've just been like, no, because I'm so uber focused on what is important to me right now on this journey. So I think if people get those sacred check boxes on paper so they can see them, it makes it a lot easier for them to get up every single day and go, no, that doesn't align with me.
It's a filter. It gives people a conscious filter for making decisions, which can be scary if you're used to being a yes person. And again, once you build the muscle of it, practice it a few times, it can start to become your new comfort zone because then you're filtering every decision through that lens.
Yeah, and it's hard. It's hard to do if you don't have a really good grasp on who you are and what you like and what's important to you. Then it's hard to say no because you're always searching. But take that time. If you invest that time up front to start aligning these things with your life, the payoffs are going to come significantly on the backside.
Well, and being able to say no, that comes to the 4th step is once you have that filter system, then you can decide what no longer belongs.
Yes.
And so things can start to fall off your plate. So what did that look like for you when you started deciding what no longer belonged on your plate anymore?
What a tough journey. I mean, I had, when you're doing businesses, so I've done a total of about 25 companies so far in my lifetime. When I really came to this conclusion, I had 13 companies going at once, way too many. Only a couple of them even aligned with me. And so for me getting up every single day, I had to go in and unweave a big web. I had, businesses don't just stop because you got up and had a revelation that they no longer belong with you. So I had to go and unweave. It probably took me about 5-6 years to really go and sell the businesses that weren't important to me. To some I just was able to shut down. The majority I couldn't. There's people, right? I mean, there's jobs, so you just can't get up one day and just shut it down and say, sorry, folks, I found my purpose. It's one of those things. It's like I got to find somebody and get somebody in here who can really serve you better than I can serve you, in the positions that you have with me. So it took a good 5 to 6 years to either sell, change, pivot, do all of that.
Did you find that there were people that also didn't belong any longer in your life?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I'm a people person too. I love people. And I love people with all different ideas. I'm not the guy, it's even I know we've got such a political divide between, somebody who might be a MAGA now and somebody who I've never even been a registered Democrat. And the right-wing Republican groups call me a flaming liberal. I'm like, what? I'm a Reagan Republican, man. Just because I think moderately, all of a sudden I'm on the extreme side of the spectrum, right? But for me, it's kind of always been about, I want to listen to all different points of view. I don't care if you're a MAGA. I don't care what you are. I'm not going to attack you. I want to understand. Let's talk about your thinking here. Because, at the end of the day, we don't all disagree that much. I think we more disagree just kind of on how to do it, right? It's kind of like, and I know politicals or situations right now are just a mess, but if you think about, I don't think we should I'm not for illegal immigration, but I am for trying to get really good pathways for people to come into this country that want to, better their lives or to try to make change. So it's kind of like I might agree with Meg on the fact that illegal immigration is bad, but how we do it, we might have to find some common ground. But
right.
In general, there's plenty of people that come into your life. And, the people that are closest to me that are with me, they aren't perfectly thinking like I think all the time, but we're aligned in the fact that how we get up, how we interact, how we do life is very similar. The worst thing that you can do is get somebody in your life who is a martyr or a cancer or somebody who's coming in the poor me people. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. You want to talk about having somebody come in that can just absolutely destroy your energy and steal and steal and steal from you emotionally. When you get those types of people in your life, run, get out of there, because they don't want to be better. They don't want to improve. They just want they want that pity. They want that story. They want the sympathy. They want I always tell people, be very, 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 very selective about who you bring into your life.
Yeah, the
because,
energy vampires.
oh my God, they will
Yeah.
suck the life out of you,
Yeah.
right? So be selective in that, but in general, again, you're never going to find anybody who thinks like you, and don't surround yourself by diverse thought and diverse people, and just diversity in general is a beautiful, wonderful, wonderful thing, right? Because if you start thinking like, if you get into groups that just think like you and that's it, then you're also in trouble because you're not going to grow intellectually up here, right? So and sometimes it's hard to do. Sometimes I sit in with rooms and I'm just like, oh my God, I don't know if I want to be in this room any longer. But at the same time, if I can at least listen and hear and maybe get a different perspective on life, that's okay too.
Well, it's not only important to notice the people that suck a lot of energy out of you in your life, but it's also important to notice the naysayers. As I don't know if you've ever read The Artist's Way, but Julia Cameron talks in The Artist's Way about the naysayers. And you tell a story in your book that I also didn't know and was just cracking up and also thinking, oh my God, think of how your life would have been different. When you were 14, you had an idea that people poo-pooed all over, that if you had followed through on that, maybe your life would have been a little bit different. Do you know the story I'm talking about?
There's several of those. So which one? Which like
I'm talking about the gas,
I've had a lifetime of these stories, by the way.
the gas pumps.
Oh yeah. Well, I thought it was and it wasn't even so much people poo-pooed on it. So that was like literally, I mean, we were young. I think gas back then was like 75 cents a gallon, I think.
This would have been like mid to late-ish 80s.
Yeah.
Keep in mind. So
Yeah, but we would go, you'd go to the gas pump, and you would go and you'd cash up your car. You'd go in and then you'd pay the cashier and then you'd move on with your day. Well, I always thought back then, I was like, well, what if you could just come up to the pump and put a credit card in the gas pump and it would just charge the card for your gas and then you wouldn't even have to go in and deal with the cashier. So I got all the drawings done. I went through all the process of my idea. And again, I was young, right? And I put it to an invention submission service and they came back and said, well, we can do it, but it's $3,500. Well, I'm 14 years old. I don't have $3,500 at that point, right? I guess I could have went and painted some more curves or something. But anyway, at the end of the day, I was like, well, and I just, filed it away and set it away. And of course, years later, yeah, you can go and do exactly that at the gas pump. And who knows? I mean, maybe somebody else would already have I don't know if somebody else maybe had the idea or whatever, but back then it wasn't being done.
No.
And I thought it was a great idea.
And my dad had a gas station. So
right.
I think that's why that example really resonated with me.
Yeah.
And it's such a great example of having an idea and not acting on it. I mean, you weren't able to act on it because you didn't have $3,500 as a teenager, which is completely understandable. And I remember way back on episode 2 of the podcast, I had Josh Thurman, the founder and owner of Lava Box Portable Campfires, who I still want to get us all together since we're local.
Yeah.
One of the big takeaways that he said is, he said, don't wait. Our world is moving at warp speed and there are so many ideas and people are going to have your same ideas. Don't wait. And so I wanted to get your thoughts on that and something kind of related, which is failures, because there's sort of missed opportunities and there's failures. And as you said, people who see a successful entrepreneur often don't see the missed opportunities and failures. So in addition to the credit card example, what have been some other opportunities that you have missed and what have been some of the failures too?
Well, there's plenty of failures. I mean, kind of those things where we learn when we fall down, right? That's when we learn the most. That's when we get the most valuable lessons. That's when we get the best information, the best feedback that we get is when we fall flat on our face, right? The problem is so many people, they'll fall on their face and they get up and go, I don't want to do that again. I don't want to try again. I don't want to risk failing again. But there's no failure. There's just not. And I know that's an overused thing, but it's so true. There is no failing. There's a lot of learning. And there have been plenty of businesses where I got into it and it's like either I didn't like it, or I sucked at it, or, just plain it didn't work. Maybe it was an idea that I had taken, but the thing about it is more than ever, like when I was 14, that was different. We didn't have a lot of the stuff that's happening now with AI generation and such. The evolution of what we're going to be going through with ideas, invention, new things is going to go at warp speed compared to when we were young, compared to 10 years ago. It's going to be like the changes that you're going to see in health, the changes that you're going to see in business, the changes that you're going to see in the ability to complete projects. Just everything right now more than ever is going to go at this light speed. And you're going to have a choice, especially if you're Gen X and looking back going, well, now I'm going to try to get into the game or I'm going to do this. If you don't start embracing the AI and the technology and that stuff that's out there, you are dead in the water. You're not going to get off the starting blocks, because right now things are progressing so quickly and advancing so quickly. The stuff that I'm even seeing, I'm blown away. And the problem is you get to be, and I see this maybe not so much in the 50s, but I've worked with a lot of, in the professions that I'm in, like one of the professions is in commercial real estate. And if you talk about people who do valuation in commercial real estate, the average age of an MAI, which is the highest designation you can have there, is 62 years old. So a new piece of technology comes out and they go, I don't want to learn that. I don't want to, and if you're not doing that, if you're not evolving with that technology, if you're not evolving with all this new stuff, you're done. You're dying. Right? So what I tell people is you got to get up, whether it's that idea, that invention, that whatever, don't let it sit. Somebody else is going to come with it tomorrow, and actually right now I'm CEOing a startup company that has a technology thing that they are developing. And right now they're about 3 steps ahead of the competition right now, about 3 steps ahead. But that's going to fill in so quickly if they waited, if they thought, if they, said, well, let's take 6 months to whatever. They might lose all 3 of those steps immediately just because of how quickly we can all move. So I just tell people, if you've got that idea and it's just sitting up here, it's no good to anybody. It's the same thing with that book. If it's all sitting up here, it's not any good to anybody. So if you have something, even if you don't know if it's going to work, you got to try it. I don't want to sit there, when I'm dying, when I'm on my deathbed, I don't want to look back and go, gosh, I wish I would have at least tried that. Boy, that was a good idea. Or that gas thing, right? The credit card. I look back and go, man, just think if I would have had that $3,500 when I was a kid. We probably wouldn't be talking here. I'd be on my yacht. You'd be looking behind me. I'd have boats in the background. The thing about it is like I still have those drawings in my boxes, and I go, well, that was an opportunity missed because it had to sit.
Yeah. And most people, coming back to something we said earlier, especially now, they're going to think, well, I'm too old, or I'll get to it when I have the time, when I retire, when the kids are in school, when I, quote, have more time. And one of the things you emphasize in the book time and time again is the concept of time and what you were talking about. Don't wait. You are not going to be here forever. And while I don't like to look at time from a scarcity mindset, and I don't think you are either, I think there's a delicate balance of recognizing, we don't need to feel scarce about time, and we want to recognize that, we're not here forever. And so when are you going to implement that idea? And it can start with something very small.
I always think about my grandfather. He grew up also in Lexington, or he didn't grow up in Lexington. He was there in Lexington when I was growing up, but he had a hardware store, a coast-to-coast hardware store back in the day. I don't know if those are still around.
I forgot about those. Yeah.
Yeah, but he owned that hardware store, and he would get up every day. He was an entrepreneur in the sense that he was the the franchisee who owned that store, and he would get up and do his thing, and but he got so caught up, like it was such a tough grind, that all the time he would say to me, one of these days I'm going to have time to go fishing. One of these days I'm going to have time to go golfing. One of these days I'm going to, and it was just, he never did and never could because he had to keep working and working and working and working. And then he died, right? I mean, blessed to have him until he's like 88 years old, but then life was over for him. And guess what? The fishing didn't happen. The golfing didn't happen. All these things didn't happen. I actually have my own savings funds right now. Like when I do any kind of work, I have a savings fund that I call my Gordon fund. My grandfather was Gordon. And I'll take X amount of my earnings and I put it in my Gordon fund that says, okay, I can use these monies to go do whatever I want. If it's golfing, if it's, fishing, if it's traveling, whatever it is, 25% of these funds go into my Gordon fund because I want to be able to do all those things that maybe he didn't get a chance to do. And, for me, I love looking at his name every day. And, he runs through me every single day of my life, especially on this journey. But I always say, when I'm talking to him, I always take those monies, and when I deposit, I say, I'm doing this for you, Gramps, and I think it's important. I think it's important that we are getting up. And tomorrow, you're not guaranteed tomorrow. I'm not guaranteed tomorrow. It's not even an age thing. Hell, you could be 30 years old, but you're not guaranteed tomorrow. I've lost so many friends that had no idea. One day they're living life and things are great, and the next day they're gone. Yeah. And guess what? This world is not going to stop when you are gone. I hate to tell you that, but it's going to keep going. People are going to keep going to work. I'll watch a funeral procession, and I'll watch people who are driving into work, driving right past a funeral procession. And I'm thinking, life doesn't just stop when you are gone. It is going to carry on and continue. But what are you going to leave behind when you do? When you go, what are you going to have left behind? And are you going to be able to say, are your kids going to look at you and go, God, yeah, my dad was crazy, but he sure lived his life exactly the way that he wanted to live his life?
There are two things I wanted to talk to you about. One is something you say in the book that I want to actually challenge you on a little bit.
Good.
And the other one is something that you don't say in the book that I'm curious about why. So the first one you say in the book, and I'm trying to find the quote, is you say that fear is a zero value proposition. And so I want to have a little debate about that. Tell me why you think fear is a zero value proposition.
Why don't you challenge me first?
I mean, you got Attorney Michele is coming out here.
I know.
So the reason I'm asking about this is because from my perspective, and again, this is just my perspective, but as a mindfulness teacher, I believe that all emotions are valid. The key is to change our relationship to the emotion instead of trying to resist or suppress the emotion. That's where we get in trouble. And fear, from a historical perspective and from a neurological perspective, is very valuable. Back in the day, fear served a very important purpose, which was to keep us alive. The problem is that our fear instincts, our negativity bias has gotten hijacked over centuries so that we are now fearing way more than is necessary and focusing on that fear. So I get that. And I always get a little leery when I hear people talking about ignoring their fear or suppressing their fear, because then I'm like, you're just resisting, which is increasing your suffering. And so for me, the key is not saying that fear is a zero value proposition, but it's looking at the fear and saying, what is this fear trying to protect me from? And what can I learn from this fear? So that's why I wanted to have that debate with you. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I wouldn't say to suppress it. Don't suppress anything, right? I mean, every feeling we have, every thought we have, understand it, try to take it inside and really process it. But where it's zero, the zero part comes in is the fact that when people let it control them, or they don't overcome it, or they don't understand it, or they don't confront it, or they don't beat it. And we all have fear. I have fears every freaking day of my life. It's like fear of that call, or fear. I could tell you plenty. I give you a list of a million things that I'm afraid of in life. But the fact of the matter is if we let that win, that's when we get to that no-win proposition for you, right? Where you're sitting there going, okay, I'm just going to succumb to the fear and then not do anything. I'm going to be stagnant. I'm going to let it control my situations. I'm going to let it impact my income. I'm going to let it take away that thing I really want to do, but I'm too afraid to go out there and do it, right? So it's more about, do you let fear win? And not saying that you can eliminate it. You'll never eliminate fear. Not going to happen. And I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're at the top of your game. I don't care if you're the most successful person in the world. You're going to sit there, and there's things you're just going to be fearful of. I'm fearful of the day I lose my dad, right? And there's things that you can't control either. But at the end of the day, it's letting that fear win, or letting it stop you from doing what's meaningful to you. That's that zero proposition.
So I think we're on the same page with that. That makes sense. Yeah. I'm glad you agree with me. Just kidding.
Well,
I'm glad I won that argument. No, I'm just kidding.
You're the host.
No, but
you're the host.
But I hear you saying that, it's really when people let fear get in the way, and especially finding their purpose or doing that one thing, following through on that idea that they have this hit to do, but then they're like, no, I can't afford it, or what will people think of me, or all of those things. So it is really looking at the fear and asking, okay, what am I here to learn? What can the fear teach me, and how can I move through it?
Yeah.
Not suppress it.
100%.
Yeah. So the thing that is understandably absent from your book, and I say understandably is because this is a concept that is not popular with our generation, or most people or Americans for that matter. And I really I'm going to probably put you on the spot a little bit, but I really am curious and want to get your thoughts about the role of self-compassion in being an outlier and building a life by design. And the reason I ask is that, again, as a mindfulness teacher, I know that self-compassion is a key we know from over 1,300 studies at least, that self-compassion is critical in building resilience, in minimizing negative self-talk, which we haven't really talked about yet, in having a better relationship with ourselves, in being able to show up and serve without burning out. And all of these are some of the tenets that we're going to, I hope, talk about here in a minute. So I'm just curious, what are your thoughts, as I put you on the spot now, about how self-compassion could help us to be an outlier? And what are some ways that you haven't been really kind to yourself on your outlier journey?
We're the worst to ourselves. There's nobody who treats ourselves worse than our own selves, right? Because we're the biggest critics. We have the highest expectations. We get up every single day. It's one of those things where it's kind of like, and how you talk to yourself, how people talk to themselves in general is miserable. If other people talk to me the way that I would talk to myself sometimes, I would be so pissed off. But for some reason, it's okay when you get up and do it, right? So, for you as a person who's trying to just go through life, and number one, you got to be forgiving to yourself on so many different levels. Because you think what other people see of you sometimes sucks, but what you see in yourself, every single one of your flaws. You know where you're letting yourself down. You know where you're letting other people down. You have all this information. So how you talk to yourself about those things is so critical. I caught myself the other day. I forget what it was, but something not so great happened. I was having kind of a crappy day, and I sat myself down and just had to say, hey, it's okay. I said, you're okay. I think my exact words were like, hey, you're okay, buddy. You're fine. You might have had a bad day, or something might have not gone the way that you had the expectation that it should have went. But to be able to go, you know what, you're okay. And you got to, again, it's one of those things where I think people are just so harsh with themselves. And it's part of the thing that sets them back. You need to have empathy for yourself. You need to be accepting of who you are and know that, you know what, I am not perfect all the time. I am just not. I am sorry, and I'm not going to be just perfect all the time, where everybody has, especially when people have an expectation outside of you that you're this invincible, perfect person. But really, in the reality of it is, none of us are. There's not a single soul who is. So you got to just learn how you talk to yourself and be in that position to be like, it's okay. It's okay. And
that seems really important, especially in the context of failures, as you talked about earlier, to be able to show some kindness to yourself and be like, that's okay that didn't go as I planned. What's the feedback from that, and how can I grow? So I hear you practice self-compassion. I hear that in you.
Well, you have to.
Yeah.
Because if you're not, all you're going to do is, it's like you're piling on. Society can be critical enough at times as it is, but you know the worst of you and you know the best of you. And so if you're not willing to kind of take a good accounting, and maybe you're sitting there, maybe there's a lot more of the worst of you than the best of you, then you go, okay, at least you acknowledge it, and then you can figure out how to start changing and being better or being different.
Yeah, I am by far my own worst oppressor. Absolutely.
Yeah. Most are.
Let's shift a little bit then, and also coming back to something that is very common among Gen Xers. You talk in the book about how people of all generations often complain about the younger generation, saying, oh, they're so lazy and they're so complacent and they're so entitled. Like, every generation has done that about the younger generations, for sure. And there's some truth maybe in each of the generations for that. But I'm curious, in what ways do you see Gen Xers, especially at this stage in life, being complacent in their lives?
Complacent. Well, everybody thinks their generation's the best generation, number one. We all, I think Generation X is awesome and it's the best in this. Mm-hmm. But then I also know that there's so many brilliant people coming through even in the next generations. I know we crush on the millennials at times and that, but at the end of the day, it's we just have different experiences that made us who we are, right? Like you and I, when we were growing up, we didn't have social media. We didn't even have internet when we were growing up. I remember sitting in their school with those old, big, huge Macs that were like this big.
Yep.
Right? So, it's just a matter of the experience is different. The way that we're being brought up is different. The tools and resources we have available to us are different, right? And so I think the complacency comes in that, for criminy sakes, I sure wish I had half the tools that the next generations have right now at their disposal. Think how much smarter kids are going to be. And some people are like, they're not going to be smarter. It's like, well, come on. Are you kidding me? The information that we have at our fingertips, I used to pull out those stupid Encyclopedia Britannicas to get information or to write a report or whatever it might have been, right? And you're flipping through pages and looking, trying to find information. And our knowledge was just a set of encyclopedias. Think about the knowledge that we have. Now, there are some downsides to having so much knowledge at our fingertips, because trying to sort through what's truth and what's false can be a real problem. It's kind of like, I see these memes that, I get pretty upset about memes. We talk about fake news. People talk about fake news all the time. We're the worst. We're the biggest distributor of false information on the planet, because we need to get that click, or we want to get that algorithm, or we want. So what we do is we get these memes that we know somebody's going to share. I saw one the other day. Somebody was going after Chelsea Clinton for something, a big story, right? And the thing about it was they were saying that she needs to go to jail, and this guy shared it and said, this is horrible, this person needs to be prosecuted. And it's like, you can take that information at face value. Me, I'm not that guy. I'm going to see if there's truth to it. And I went and did and fact checked it, and it was all false, right? It's false narrative. But here's somebody who believes wholeheartedly that this is true information, it's good information, I'm going to share this with everybody, and then they share it with everybody, and then they share. So all of a sudden, what's true and what's false, right? And I put a little note on this thing, saying, hey, just so you know, I did a fact check on this, and this is just not true information. It's like, oh, you're just a Clinton lover. I'm like, no, I'm not a Clinton lover. It's like, I don't even care. It could have been a post going after a liberal, and I would have fact checked it and said the same thing, just saying it's just not true information. But I think that's one of the big problems with all this incredible information that this next generation is going to have to deal with, is what's true and what's false. It's just kind of like even some of this stuff that's what is it, the dark web or whatever they call it, where they go. I mean, a lot of stuff. My voice is cloned, so I've got stuff that's out there that people could hear, and they'll have no idea if it's me or if it's a clone. Or right now they're in the process of cloning me physically. I mean, so we're going to have to ascertain.
So terrifying.
I know, it is terrifying. One of me is plenty for the world. But the fact of the matter is, it's kind of like, who's to know if I'm watching a video and somebody's talking about something and it's really negative stuff? Is that really even them, right? So I guess that was a long way about your question about these next generations. But every generation has their challenges. Every generation has their opportunities. Every generation has their beauty. Every generation has their struggles. And for where we're at in Gen X, if you think you're too old for what's coming with this next generation, then you are. If you identify the fact that, hey, I just went past halftime. I'm in the second half of this game. So, every game's got, not every game, but like, a typical game, say you got 4 quarters in the game, right? And you got halftime. And when we hit our 40s, and who knows, maybe right now we're at our halftime. Maybe because of the advances that we're getting with, I've read some reports now that what they're doing medically might extend our lives and our mental capacity and everything else, physically, everything, even further out. So maybe you're not even sitting at halftime at this point.
Yeah.
I don't know that, but I do know this. I'm sure going to take care of my body as much as I can right now in case those breakthroughs do come through, that I'm well positioned so that I can be a part of another generation and another generation and another generation. Yeah. It's beautiful.
Well, most of us won't even be able to afford to live much longer past that because we won't have saved up for that. But what do you think are some of the, and I'm making generalizations here, but what do you think are some of the key characteristics or traits of Gen Xers that would contribute to them being an outlier?
Well, I think the biggest thing is, you talk about, and it's very different, life's very different now, but we had to be home when the streetlights came on, right? Or the fact that we weren't allowed in the house. We did have to drink out of the garden hose, if we were thirsty and we were outside doing that kind of thing, right? And the thing about it it's like, or they talk about seatbelts, or helmets on your bike, or whatever it might be, right? It's just like, here, let's take a chance. So there are a lot of things that we did where we had to be self-sufficient. And I think a lot of times it's like, am I giving my children the opportunity to be self-sufficient? Or am I paying for this and abiding to that, or being fearful to let them go out and just be in the world and get tripped up and fall, right? Am I giving them the tools that when I'm not here, that they're going to be thriving, not just living, but thriving? And I think as a Gen Xer, that was one of the blessings and everything. Yeah, there's a lot of shitty things that might have happened, but at the same time, boy, the resiliency that we have, I think it's like no other.
Yeah, resilient. I think that is a key word in describing our generation, and just the adaptability of things that we've been able to navigate. So the invitation is for people, especially at this stage of life, to come back to that. It's just something that's gotten buried under all the layers of societal expectations. You still have that resilience and adaptability. We just have to excavate it a little bit.
And
I
then
think
give that to your kids.
Yeah.
I mean, as much as you can, teach your kids that.
Well, now I'm not a parent, so I'm probably speaking a little bit out of turn, but I find it fascinating that the generation Gen Xers who were so rebellious and carefree and took a bunch of risks and rode without helmets and seatbelts became the helicopter parent generation.
Because we know what we used to do. And we're like going, oh God, I don't want my kid to do that.
Yeah.
I used to do that. And I'm shocked that I'm still alive sometimes, the stuff that I used to do.
Yeah. Oh, no, absolutely. Bridge jumping in Lexington. I don't know.
Oh, my God. We used to go out. I remember going to a Johnson Lake. I was at a friend's house at a Johnson Lake in the winter. Lake is frozen. And there was a party across the lake. And we had a choice. We could either walk the road and go to the party, or we could go across the lake. And I still remember that ice popping under our feet as we were walking across that lake, knowing that if we went through, you're done. It's nighttime. It's dark. It's like, how stupid is that? So, yeah, I don't want my kids to do stupid things like that. But you also got to give them enough leash to make some mistakes.
So, yes, let's have you dispense some more wisdom. Because you are clearly a role model we should all learn from. But no, seriously, what are the backbone of your book is these 7 tenets of becoming an outlier. And I don't want to talk about all of them because I want people to buy the book and read them for themselves. But I want to see if you could pick just one. What do you think is maybe the most important tenet? And how could people take one small step toward implementing that tenet in their life to become an outlier?
One of the things is you got to do the work, right? I mean, if you don't do the work, you're dead at the starting point. So many people, it's interesting to me. Some people want to give it to them. Can you just do it for me? Can you give it to me? But being an outlier is not easy. It really takes thoughtfulness. It really takes getting that alignment that we were talking about. And if you're sitting there going, I'm just comfortable, and you still want to remain comfortable by trying to bridge over into that outlier space, you're not going to make it. So you got to be like going, I'm willing to be uncomfortable, but I'm willing to do whatever is necessary inside of me to go down this path and to be this person, right? And the second that you don't do that, the second that you're not willing to do the work, you could point to 99% of people don't want to do that work. They just don't. And that's okay. If you don't want to do it, you don't want to do it. But if it's meaningful enough, if you burn enough on the inside where it hurts, you're sitting there living out of alignment, you're not happy, you're not satisfied, and it just, you're going to that desk and you're just miserable sitting there because you're not aligned, you got to do the work. Start at that starting point, identify that purpose, get those check boxes, and then do that work necessary to start getting up every day to make it happen.
I think that's a critical place to start because, and I'll speak from my own experience, I feel like becoming an entrepreneur can have the misconception of, I'm not going to have to work as hard.
Oh my God.
It's the complete opposite. And we're not saying, you don't need to become an entrepreneur to become an outlier. Like, we're not saying that.
Nope.
And there could be something that you want to do on the side that helps you feel like an outlier. The message is that don't think that just because you are doing something aligned with your purpose, that you're not going to have to work very hard. Often it will be quite the opposite.
You'll, instead of doing 40 hours, you'll do 70. But guess what? Those 70 hours will be so fulfilling. And they'll be so aligned with who you are. It will not feel like work. I mean, I go places. I'm a 70-hour-a-week kind of guy, but I don't feel it. I don't see it. I don't, you know what I mean? Because I'm not even thinking about, this is work. I'm thinking about, wow, I just like doing it. And you were talking about, you don't have to be an entrepreneur to be an outlier. You're totally right on that. I mean, maybe my purpose in life is to go cure cancer. Well, I'm probably not going to go do an entrepreneurial and whatever to go cure cancer. I'm probably going to go somewhere where I have really good support systems and where I can take my passion and my purpose and I can really execute on it at the highest levels. A group that maybe is getting good funding for cancer research or whatever it might be. It's just the whole idea is just being very aligned with who you are and then being exceptional at doing it.
I want people too to understand that I don't think either of us is saying, and I don't think your book says this either, that you have to blow up your life currently to become an outlier or even to become an entrepreneur. And so what do you say to the people who right now just are very overwhelmed with daily life, going to work, paying the bills, getting the kids through school, taking care of aging parents, all the things? What do you say to them is a place where they can start, just so that they can start leaning into that when they don't have a lot of time or a lot of money and they don't want to blow up their life?
Yeah, I mean, but it costs zero to sit down and identify what's important to you in life, right? So that it takes you a little bit of time and some effort, but that takes zero money. I get it. Life's overwhelming at times. I mean, especially after you've been, building a life. And I always try to install these things with people who are not in this rat race yet, because that's the best time to get started. But then you get into that rat race, and how do you get out of it? So I always say take the baby steps. So many people go, oh, I'm just going to quit my job. I'm going to start this business. Life's going to be perfect. And it's not like that. It's just not. I always say baby step into it. Find out what that purpose is. Find out what you want to be doing. Make those adjustments in your life, but then maybe start with the side hustle. Yeah, you might have to keep that job for a while, and you might get home at night being tired and then eat that dinner, and then from 6 o'clock to 10 o'clock at night, go. I'm watching my wife do it right now. And I mean, I've already been doing, but for her, it was more of a, okay, when dinner happens, then we're kind of done with the day. But now she loves what she's doing, right? But she's getting up every single day, and she's writing these classes, and she's going and going and going. She used to give me a bad time because I was sleeping by 10 o'clock at night. Now she's not even in bed. I'm like, come on, like, what's going on here, lady? But for her, it's not even work. So it's kind of like, whatever you need to do, find that time, but don't just go quit that job, because the worst thing that you could do is just quit that job, the income goes away, and then you don't have the money to support yourself while you're chasing the dream. And guess what? You're chasing it, and you think you're failing, but the success might be around that one next corner, or that little bit of sustainability that you can just hold on to for a little bit to get to that point where you're going to get set free. Right? So just make sure that you've got the staying power to go the distance. And a lot of times that comes with being a side hustle. I always tell people, don't just go quit your job. Think about your job as being your biggest funder of your business. Think about, okay, I don't need to go to the bank and get a loan, and I don't need, because guess what? I have an income coming in. They're funding my dream. They're funding my business. And eventually you can leave and thank them for the opportunity, and then really be able to lean in and be sustainable long-term to what you love doing. It's not going to be overnight for you. It's just not.
I think that's good advice and a good place to start wrapping it up too. So tell people, first of all, about your primary companies and the programs or offers that you have right now that people could take advantage of to start leaning into being an outlier.
Yeah, I mean, you can go to my website, gorodman.com. I got a lot of good resources there, a lot of free resources. Read the book. I mean, the book is a blueprint for you. I mean, it's going to take you from, where you're at now to where you want to be. Kind of lay out some good fundamentals for you. You mentioned I've written 3 books. This is my favorite. Most personal book for me. It's not only about my life, but it's about what I truly believe in. And I really feel like it's a book that can help people get to where they want to go. So you can get the book on Amazon, which is a great place. Really easy to have it there like in 2 days. I don't even know how they do that anymore, but it's a wonderful thing. But I would say start with the book. Feel free to reach out to me. I love hearing from people. I love talking to people. I love to hear about people's journeys.
Yeah, and your website is gorodman.com. You also have on the website, you have a free Outlier Mindset workbook. I'm going to link all this in the show notes, which is at gorodman.com/outlier. And you have a free 30-day program called the EvolveX Outlier Challenge. That's at the same website. So everybody can find that on your website. And you have the Outlier Mindset podcast, which I was very honored to be on last year. So I'll make sure and link that in the show notes too. And just so folks know, what are the other 2 books that you've written? Because we didn't really talk about this piece of your entrepreneurial journey too much, but you're really, as you mentioned, into real estate and commercial investing in particular.
Yeah, I've got a book called Vacation Property Secrets. It's about buying vacation homes. So many people buy based on emotion and not fundamentals. And I'm a fundamental guy, so I love teaching the fundamentals of investing in real estate, and I do that in that book. My other book's an old one. It's not even in print anymore. I literally wrote it when I was 24 years old, when I was buying and flipping foreclosures back in the day. It's called Finding Your Fortune in Repossessed Real Estate. And like I said, it's not in print anymore, but that was one of my first books. And that's when writing was tough. I mean, we didn't have a lot of tools back then. I don't even know how I got through writing that one.
Probably on a typewriter.
Not quite that old. Almost.
Before we do a quick lightning round, if you have time, is there anything that we didn't talk about or that I didn't ask you that you want to say?
You and I could talk for
I know.
ever. And we
Yeah.
could probably do a 10-hour podcast and really annoy the crap out of people. But no, I think that this is a great starting point.
Absolutely. And I'd love to have you back. And I definitely want to have Gina on because she has an amazing story to share herself in her
She is
entrepreneurial
the
journey.
best.
So real quick lightning round because I know you need to go. Fondest Gen X childhood memory.
I enjoyed growing up in Nebraska. It was one of those things where the small town living is a nice place to grow up. So I've got a lot of fond memories just of the people. So many good people that were running around out there that were a really big part of my life. So I've got a lot of fond memories from just the people that I grew up around.
Yeah, I echo that. Your biggest piece of advice for other Gen Xers who are trying to make a shift in their life?
Do the work. I know we just talk about that, but it's one of those things, we're here today and gone tomorrow. Don't think you're too old, but don't think you're too young, and know that tomorrow's not guaranteed. So I say get up every single day and really live your life by your own design. Quit living it by everybody else's design.
Favorite Gen X era word or phrase?
Oh God, I don't even know. That's such a tough one. Gosh, favorite Gen X.
You've said criminy a couple times here.
I know, right? I always think back to like that show Valley Girl. It's like totally tubular or whatever it might be, but I don't use that kind of slang. I don't know. I just, I guess in the terms of Larry the Cable Guy, I've always like get her done.
Mm-hmm. That's a Nebraska thing too, kind of. Just get her done. Lots of relatives that say that. Do you have a Gen X era theme song for your life?
I'm an 80s freak. So if you think about just in general with music, I mean, it's almost sick. My wife hates it because a song will come on. I can say, it's this band, this is the album that it was on, and this is the year that it was released. And I can do that with anytime any kind of 80s music comes on. I don't miss.
Just totally 80s. Yep.
Yep.
What do you most appreciate about being a Gen Xer?
That we had to do it the hard way. That we didn't have a lot of the luxuries growing up that a lot of people have now. And I think it's made us very, again, resilient and really strong. And, there are some bad things that came with it, but at the end of the day, I wouldn't go back and change a bit. Even the worst parts of my childhood made me exactly who I am today. And so I would never, ever want to change it because I would be afraid to change all the blessings that I have right now.
Thank you so much for sharing your story and your wisdom and your book. I really want to invite people to go get the book. And I appreciate you so much.
I appreciate you too.
Thanks so much, Rodman. I had such a blast having that conversation with you. And I hope that you, my fellow Gen Xers, got inspired by listening to Rodman's journey. Inspired to know that you don't have to be a victim of your circumstances and that it is possible to step into that life of purpose, a life by your own design. And your first step to doing that will be to check out the show notes and grab your copy of The Outlier Mindset. Don't forget to share your thoughts, comments, and reflections with me by email at podcast@lifefromthesummit.com or wherever you're listening to this episode. Please like, share, and review the episode because it helps bump it up in the algorithms to get out there to more Gen Xers. Thanks so much for coming on the journey this week. And until next time, stay gold, Gen Xers.